Now, so far we were talking about only own price elasticity of demand. Now let us say we are talking about cross price elasticity. Right? Now, while defining own price elasticity, we define in this way: delta Q by Q, this is for X, and then we divide it by delta P X by P X. Let us assume that X and Y, these are the related product. Okay, so this is called own price elasticity of demand. This is own price. Why this is called own price? Because I am considering the change in Q when there is a change in its own price, which is Px. I am considering a change in Qx when there is a change in Px. Right? When there is a change in Px. So that is why this is called own price elasticity of demand. And then if you replace Px by Py, if you recall, while discussing about demand curve, we said that the goods might be related, and for a change in price of the related product, obviously there would be a change in the product that we are discussing. For example, rice and wheat. If there is a change in wheat price, then obviously there would be a change in demand for rice as well. So that is why, since demand depends not only its own price but also the price of related product, we can get one more elasticity concept by replacing Px with Py. So that means what would be the cross price elasticity? Delta Qx, this remains same always, by Qx divided by delta Py by Py. This is called cross price elasticity of demand. Okay, because I am now considering what will happen to change in demand for X when there is a change in the price of related product, which is Py. Now, one more thing, we have discussed that own price elasticity of demand is always negative. So this is always negative. But what about cross price elasticity of demand? Look at this. This is delta Qx divided by delta Py, okay, into delta Qx by delta Qx by delta Py multiplied by Py by Qx. X. Okay, this is cross price elasticity of demand. Now, this cross price elasticity of demand has nothing to do with the slope of the demand curve for X, because this is delta Qx by delta Py, not the Px. Therefore, cross price elasticity of demand, which is defined as, let's say this is, I'm defining epsilon xy. It can be positive or can be negative. Okay, can be positive or can be negative as well, depending on that means it depending on the nature of relationship between x and y. Now let us assume two cases. Let's assume x and y are substitutes to each other. X and y is substitute to each other. So when there will be an increase, let's say an increase in price of y, if this increases, what will happen when there is an increase in price of y? That means I'm giving an example for better understanding. So let's say x is rice and y is wheat. So if Py increases, what will happen to demand for X? Obviously, when wheat becomes more costly, more consumers will switch from wheat to rice consumption. And as a result of which, demand for X, okay, or QX will also increase. A rise in price of wheat will result in an increase in demand for X. So that means this will also increase. And what will happen to cross price elasticity of demand? That means for a change in price of Y, there is a change in demand for X. So that means we can say that cross price elasticity of demand is positive, is greater than 0. Okay, so that means when the goods are substitutes, cross price elasticity of demand is positive. That is what we have learned. So from the sign of the cross price elasticity of demand, we can easily understand the type of relationship between the two goods. If the goods are substitute to each other, cross price elasticity of demand is positive, which is very easy to understand. When there is a rise in price of wheat, obviously that will lead to an increase in demand for X. So that is why when Py increases, QDX increases, as a result of which cross price elasticity of demand is positive. Now, let us consider the second case, case 2. X and Y are complementary. What is the example? Let's say X is tea and Y is sugar. Y is sugar. Okay. So now if Py increases, what will happen to demand for X? Py increases means sugar is now more costly and we cannot have tea without sugar. So as a result of which, what will happen when sugar price increases, the demand for X will fall. And as a result of which, what will happen? The sign of the cross price elasticity of demand, EXY, is actually, here it is still P, is negative. So when the goods are complementary in nature, a rise in the price of the related product will result in a fall in demand for the good that we are discussing. A rise in the price of sugar results in a fall in demand for tea, and therefore cross price elasticity of demand is negative when the goods are complementary in nature. So two things we have learned then from the cross price elasticity of demand, that they can be, goods can be either substitute or complementary depending on the sign of the cross price elasticity of demand. While own price elasticity of demand is always negative, cross price elasticity of demand is not, because cross price elasticity of demand is defined in this way. Okay, which is defined in this way. It can be positive or it can be negative. So we have learned now cross price elasticity of demand also. So what is the remaining then from the demand function? If you recall, demand is a function of own price, cross price, and income. Since we have now learned how to determine the elasticity of demand with respect to the first two factors, Px and Py, now we are moving into the third factor, which is income. So that is what is called income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity okay. Now if you apply the same analogy by which you learn price elasticity of demand and replace Py with I, you will get the income elasticity of demand. So that is why you should first learn the concept of one elasticity and then simply apply the analogy in other cases. You will understand the different types of elasticity measured. So the numerator always remains same, which is change in demand for X, or rather percentage change in, delta Qx by Qx divided by delta I by I, where I represent income. So this is called E epsilon I, income elasticity of demand. And here also you can easily see that it has nothing to do with the slope of the demand curve. That is why we are not sure about the sign of the elasticity of demand for income. Okay, so let us first assume case 1, epsilon I or income elasticity is greater than 0. That means when there is an increase in income, consumers demand more of a product. Okay, as income increases, demand for a particular product increases. All right, if that is the case, we call that good as normal good. Please keep in mind this is normal good. So how is the normal good defined? Normal good is defined in terms of income elasticity. Please keep in mind, from price elasticity of demand, we classified the goods as elastic, inelastic, and unitary elastic. But from the income elasticity of demand, we are defining the good firstly as a normal good when it is positive. The sign of income elasticity is positive. That means an increase in income leads to increase in demand for X. So normal good. That means as income increases, that leads to demand for X to increase. Now the question is, okay, I understand as income increases, demand for X increases, but is it a proportional increase or more than proportional increase? Okay, if it is more than proportional, so that means there are two alternative situation. In case 1 itself, epsilon I is actually positive, means let's say this is greater than 1. As income increases, consumers spend proportionately more for certain products. Then the goods are known as luxury goods. And B, when this is less than 1, then we call it normal good. So that means here, even though I said this is normal good, I would rather say that we have to classify this case. Income elasticity of demand is positive, and then let's say I should not tell this as normal good. Rather, normal good is only one case of the two possibilities, because in both are greater than 0. Okay, so when income elasticity is positive, we can define the goods either in terms of a normal good or in terms of a luxury good. In both the cases, higher income leads to more consumption. In both the cases, as income increases, that leads to QDX to increase. Now the question is whether that increase in QDX is more than proportional or less than proportional. Okay, when it is less than proportion, it is normal good. When it is more than proportion, we call it luxury good. Or instead of normal, let's say I will classify these as necessary good. Then it would be more appropriate. So it is still as normal good. So that means a positive income elasticity means the good is normal. And normal good has two categories, luxury and necessary. When it is more than one, then we call it luxury. When it is less than one, we call it necessary. But what will happen in case 2? Let's say EI, or income elasticity of demand, is less than 0. So that means EI is less than 0. So that means income increases, as income increases, that leads to QDX to fall. When income increases, consumers are consuming less of a product. Okay, less of a product. What is that good called? That good is known as inferior good. Can you give an example of such commodity from your own experience? When income is increasing, you are consuming less of a product. Let us assume that you don't like cabbage. Okay, so as income is increasing, you are consuming less of cabbage and you are going for other costly vegetables. In that case, cabbage might be an inferior good for you. But please keep in mind, these things we are talking about, these are all individual taste and preferences. A good which is inferior to you might be normal for me. A good which is normal for me is inferior to you. So when income increases, you are reducing cabbage consumption. That is why cabbage is inferior to you. But if I don't reduce cabbage consumption, then for me it is still a normal or necessary good. Right? So that is why it is difficult to get a product which is universally inferior. Okay? That is why what I'm saying, it is difficult to get a product which is universally inferior, because it all depends on individual's taste and preferences, right? So this is called income elasticity of demand. That means income elasticity of demand will help you understand, define the goods either normal or inferior. If it is normal, then it can increase either proportionately or less than proportionately. Now, one thing I need to bring in here, we said that income is a parameter while deciding about demand, right? And we said that in our previous sessions, as income increases, demand for that product increases. Previously, we discussed. Let's say this is D2. That means what is the type of good we are discussing here? We assume the good is normal in our previous lectures. When we talked about shift in demand, we discussed a case where demand was shifting because of a change in income, and this is the only case we discussed. So when the good is normal, then only the demand curve will shift rightward. Consumers will demand more for that good. So that means this is the normal good context. However, now we have learned another case. Let's say this is D1. As income increases, demand curve may shift leftward also. And that is the case of inferior good. Why we discussed only one case? Because we didn't want to complicate the things with too many alternatives. Because at that point of time, our objective was to learn parametric shift vis-a-vis movement along the demand curve. Movement along the demand curve was happening due to a change in price. And this shift in demand happens when there is a change in parameter like income, taste and preference, so on and so forth. Once we learned that, now we are bringing alternative cases. So that means when there is a change in income, if the good is normal, then only demand curve will shift rightward. That means at each level of price, consumer will demand more of that product. The product will be treated as a normal product. Similarly, if the good is inferior, as income increases, demand curve will shift leftward, and that is why it is an inferior good. Please keep in mind, in any problem or in any question, if nothing is mentioned specifically about the nature of the product, generally we assume the good to be normal. Generally we assume. However, if possible, if specifically mentioned about the nature of the good, then we will treat about inferior good, and then we will consider specific case what will happen to that particular product which is inferior as income increases. Okay, so this is all about income elasticity of demand. So that means with this, now we learned three elasticity concepts: price elasticity of demand, own price elasticity of demand, and price elasticity of demand, which is own price elasticity of demand, Px, and then cross price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of demand. There are three elasticity concepts, but they are conceptually almost similar. So that means we are trying to measure the demand for a particular commodity X when either its own price changing or the related price of related product changing or income is changing. Since these are the three factors that determine demand for X, we have arrived at three different measures of elasticity. But conceptually they are same. That is why in the numerator you will always get delta Q X by Q X. It is only new denominator that is changing. If the denominator becomes its own price, then we are getting own price elasticity of demand. If the denominator is price of related product, then we are getting cross price elasticity of demand. And if the denominator is income, then we are getting income elasticity of demand. So basically there are three measures of elasticity. So one is called own price elasticity of demand, EP is denoted by EP. This is cross price elasticity of demand, EP XY, and this is EI, income elasticity of demand. Okay, so you first try to understand one concept, then apply the analogy. Don't try to learn this individually. We must always apply analogy. We will learn one concept, then you try to write the formula for other two elasticity measures. That is how you should learn the subject. Because what is the analogy? The numerator is always same, delta Qx by Qx, percentage change in demand for a particular product with respect to whether it is own price, price of related product, or price of income. Depending on this, you will get three different measures of elasticity. From own price elasticity of demand, we got three cases, whether it is greater than 1, less than 1, or equals to 1. When it is greater than 1, elastic demand, less than 1, inelastic demand, equals to 1, unitary elastic. Cross price elasticity of demand, we got two cases, greater than 0 or less than 0. When it is greater than 0, that means goods are substitute to each other. When it is less than 0, the goods are complementary. Okay? When the price of a related product is increasing, then demand for X is falling. That means the goods are complementary in nature. Why this is happening so? Because in case of complementary, joint consumption of both the commodities only gives you utility or satisfaction. I cannot consume only sugar or only tea. I don't get any satisfaction out of that. If I consume tea with sugar, then only I can get the utility. There are many other examples. Suppose subtle bat and cork. If cork price increases, I have to reduce the consumption of subtle bat because the joint consumption of the subtle bat and the cork only results in some utility. Okay, so in case of complementary good, this cross price elasticity of demand is negative. In case of uh, cross price elasticity positive, we get substitute goods. Similarly, when we go to the third measure of elasticity, which is income elasticity of demand, it can be either positive or negative. Positive again has two cases, either greater than 1 or less than 1. So we said that when income elasticity of demand is positive, then the good is normal good. Most of the goods are normal, actually, what we see in and around. And when it is positive, but greater than 1, we say the good is luxury good. For example, luxury goods example are, let's say, housing, let's say luxury houses, or luxury or say let's say vehicle, let's say Mercedes Benz, BMW. We say that these are all luxury goods. Why? Because when consumers income increases, they spend more on this type of vehicle, more than proportion. When it is less than 1, we simply call it is necessary good, like rice, like sugar, like dal, like salt, like clothing. Just because I have more income, I cannot consume 2 kg of rice instead of 1 kg, no? Because I have a limit on my rice consumption. These are necessary good. Just because my consumption income increases, I cannot consume more salt. Salt is a necessary good. I cannot consume more sugar because my income has increases. I cannot consume 10 pens instead of 1 pen. Okay, I cannot consume 5 watches instead of 1. These are all necessary good. 1 is enough. But of course, if my income increases, I can switch from this ordinary Timex watch to the costly watch, let's say Fossil. Then that good would be treated as a luxury good. So now you get to know what is luxury good or what is necessary good. Necessary good means we cannot consume more than what is required, necessary for our day-to-day life. We generally consume to a fixed amount. That is what I am talking about. Okay, that is what I am talking about. And if the good is negative, then we call that good is a inferior good. Okay, when income increases, I consume less of a product. That is called inferior good. Income elasticity of demand is negative. We gave the example of cabbage. At the same time, I have given you a warning. Don't consider cabbage as a universally inferior good, because it is very difficult to identify a good which is universally inferior, as it depends on individual's preference. If you don't like much cabbage, but still you are having because its price is low, then you will switch to other costly vegetables, maybe broccoli, maybe spinach and other vegetables. But if I like cabbage, whatever happens to my income, I will still consume it. So cabbage is inferior only to you. It all depends on individual's preference. So that means with this, now we have completed the discussion on one very important concept called elasticity of demand. We have learned now demand, supply, as well as elasticity of demand. The same logic is applicable for elasticity of supply as well. You can get different types of supply curve based on its elasticity, which I am not discussing today. So, in today's class, mostly we have concentrated on cross price elasticity of demand and income elasticity of